I want to tell you about Harold. Harold is an ordained Lutheran minister, loves Jesus, in his 30s, but his ministry and his life were dry. It just frustrated him because as he was reading the scriptures, especially as he was reading the book of Acts, where we're doing this series, as he was reading the scriptures, he says, the early church had such a vitality. Those who ministered had vitality. Those who received had vitality. And he kept saying to himself, why can't we have this today? Where is it? Where is what the church had? And the more he studied, the more he began to see a theme, a common thread in the New Testament, specifically in the book of Acts. And that thread was this thing that he discovered was called the baptism in the Holy Spirit. The more he read, the more he thought, this must be what I'm missing. And so he began to pray. And he said, Lord, if this is something for today, I want it. And he prayed. And he prayed. He prayed regularly. He prayed daily. And he determined that, first of all, he determined it was real because he had run across some other people who had received it. So he knew others who had received it. So he says, if this is real for them, I need it real for me also. And so one particular week, I believe, he decided to go to the Allegheny Mountains in New York. He was from New York. And he went to a cabin and he stayed and prayed. He prayed and he asked and he waited. He had made up his mind that he wasn't going to leave until he reached this new level of communication with God. And so day by day went by. Then one morning, while he was standing outside of the cabin, he was praying aloud, and he said a stillness seemed to settle over the hills. Every fiber of his body tensed as if his whole being were entering into a new plane of awareness. And he stopped speaking for a moment, and when he began to speak again, out of his mouth came, and I'm going to now quote him, out of his mouth came the most beautiful outpouring of vowels and consonants and also some strange guttural syllables. I could not recognize any of it. It was as though I was listening to a foreign language, except it was coming out of my mouth. Amazed, curious, and a bit frightened, Harold ran down the mountain, still talking aloud in this language, this tongue, and he came to the edge of a small community. And on the stoop of another cabin sat an old man, and Harold just continued to speak in the tongue that were now coming very naturally from his lips. And the man on the porch answered him back in the language which Harold did not understand. And when it became obvious to the man on the porch that as he was talking to Harold, Harold was not responding back to what he was saying, he broke into English, and this is what the man said: "How can you speak Polish and not understand it?" And Harold looked at the man and said, "I was speaking Polish." And the man laughed, thinking that this guy must be joking. What is this guy? Of course it was Polish, he said. But this Lutheran minister wasn't joking. As far as he can recall, he had never heard the language in his life. And here he is speaking it fluently enough that someone who knew the language understood and thought that they were going to have a conversation. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about power encounters.